Hello, everyone. My name is Brianna, and I work for the City of San Antonio's Solid Waste Management Department. Today, I'm going to be talking to you guys about recycling. We'll discuss what we can and cannot recycle, and really the importance of recycling. To start, we're going to go over our three carts. So, some of you may have these carts at your home, some of you may have something similar to them, but for today's purposes, we're going to talk about these three colors. The first one is our blue recycling cart. The next one is our green organics cart, and the last one is our brown trash cart. So, we're going to break down what goes into each of the three carts in just a second, but first things first, we're actually going to go over a timeline of recycling and environmentalism, just so you guys can get an idea of the history. So, starting over on the left, we're going to go over 1872, that was the establishment of Yellowstone National Park. That was signed into order by President Grant as a means to protect the land from being developed. It was really the birth of mainstream environmentalism and conservation. Next, in 1904, the first American aluminum can recycling plants were opened in Chicago and Cleveland. So, 1904, really, that's not that long ago if you really think about it. In 1916, the National Park Service was created, and that was really created to continue protecting and preserving our precious lands from being developed upon. Finally, on this section, in 1937, we had our first sanitary landfill open up in Fresno, California. That was about 140 acres large, and again, landfill technology is fairly new in the grand scheme of things. Next on our timeline, in 1965, the Solid Waste Disposal Act was passed. This was actually passed to promote better waste disposal technology. Back in the day, people were getting rid of their trash in very harmful ways, so the act really was passed in order to make sure that our human health and our environment weren't harmed and they weren't dangerous for us. In 1970, the Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA, was established by President Nixon. The main mission of the agency is really to protect human health and the environment by promoting clean air, clean water, and clean land. On April 22nd, 1970, we had our very first Earth Day. Also in 1970, the recycling symbol was born. Jumping forward quite a bit into the future, after some major environmental disasters like the Exxon Valdez oil spill in '89 and the Deepwater Horizon spill that occurred close to home here in our Texas shores, society had a huge wake-up call to protect our environment once more. This led to things like the ban of plastic bags in California. Here in Texas, we even had plastic bag bans in Austin. You'll even find on the news that many cities and states are actually banning things like straws, styrofoam, as well as things like single-use water bottles. So that brings me to my next slide. This is a slide of your waste composition. So every single week, this is what you're throwing away. The blue section represents everything that can be recycled. So 47.6% is recyclable material, aka almost half of your material can be recycled. So that's pretty interesting to point out. The green section is your organics material, which is 28.3% of your weekly waste. Organics is stuff like your yard waste, any food scraps, we'll go over that later. The 23.9% section, that's the brown section, is all of your trash waste. You're probably thinking, everything's trash. What is trash? Again, we'll go over that in just a bit. Finally, the small red sliver is that 0.2%. That is HHW. HHW stands for Household Hazardous Waste. We will break down what household hazardous waste is in just a bit, and that is actually something that we do not want in any of our three carts, and we will explain that again in just a moment. So, what goes into the brown cart? So, these are some items that you guys will commonly find in your home, in your schools, and these are items that should always, always, always go into your brown trash cart. The first thing we're going to talk about is up on the top left. Those are chip bags. So if you think about when you're eating your potato chips, Fritos, Doritos, Cheetos, the inside lining of that bag is aluminum foil. That aluminum foil is not recyclable. The reason being, when that foil makes it deep into the recycling process, when it gets really, really hot, it can actually melt onto the machines, and we don't want that to happen because it can cost lots of money, it can break the machines, and it really slows down the efficiency and the speed of the process. Next, we have rubber. So any type of rubber like the water hose pictured, any small toys, rubber bands, tires, that stuff cannot be recycled because rubber cannot melt properly. It does not go through common recycling processes. So here in San Antonio, that is not something that we can recycle in our regular old recycling facility. Next, on the top right, we actually have a candy wrapper pictured. So this also means any other small pieces of plastic. So candy wrappers, cracker wrappers, Slim Jim wrappers, any small thin plastics, they must always go inside of the trash. Think back to when I talked about the chip bags, how that foil will melt onto the machines. That's exactly what can happen with these small thin plastic wrappers. They get stuck onto the machines, or even worse, they can actually get tangled up inside of the gears and the machinery, again slowing down the process big time. Down below the plastic wrapper, we have some utensils pictured, some plastic utensils. I'm also going to talk about the hangers right next to them. So any oddly shaped metals or plastics, like the hangers or the utensils pictured, or anything with combined substances like toys, should always go in the trash. We don't have the machines or the manpower needed to recycle those materials, and again, they can also break the machines. Last but not least, we have the diaper. So, diapers are actually a really big problem in San Antonio. The main reason is that diapers are really, really dirty and they can contaminate a lot of really good recyclable material. If a small percentage of our clean recyclables gets contaminated with a dirty diaper, all of those materials are no good. So it's a big waste in the process. So we must always make sure that we put diapers clean or dirty inside of the trash. Diapers can actually cost the city up to $1 million a year in wasted product, wasted manpower. So, when the garbage man comes and takes away your brown trash cart, he sends it to this place, the landfill. Now, the landfill is essentially the city's giant trash can where we bury all of your trash underground. This picture shows a cross section of what a landfill looks like. And the way it works is we dig a hole about 100 to 500 feet deep. Then we line it with a thick layer of compacted clay, almost like cement, and then a thick polyethylene liner. That acts almost like a giant trash bag to keep everything in place. Both the liner and the clay layer are about 10 feet thick each. That helps to ensure that all of the trash doesn't end up in our soil and our environment. Next, we'll put some pipe systems in place, and that's to help protect our aquifer and our atmosphere. The first pipe system we're going to talk about is the leachate collection pipes, which are the white ones pictured in the slide. Leachate is essentially a fancy word for garbage juice. So if you're like me and you've ever taken out the garbage, you've probably had that garbage bag leak on you every once in a while with some icky, gross garbage juice. That's kind of the same thing that happens here in the landfill. You have the whole city's garbage sitting in one place, and when you have storms come through, you can make lots of leachate. What we'll do is we'll pump out the leachate to leachate collection ponds. You can see one pictured below the word landfill. What that does is that allows the leachate to evaporate off, and it helps make sure that our aquifer, which is pictured at the bottom of the slide, stays clean and that garbage juice doesn't end up in your drinking water. Next, we have the methane wells and collection pipes. Now, methane is a greenhouse gas that's emitted from the landfill. The greenhouse gas contributes to global warming and air pollution. That methane is caused by decaying organic organisms inside of the landfill. We'll talk a little bit about that later. But we don't want that stuff getting into our atmosphere, so we'll actually collect the methane and convert it into electricity to power our city. Once all that safety stuff is in place, then we'll start bringing in your garbage. So you'll see the garbage truck at the at the top dumping out your trash, and then the bulldozer getting ready to run it over. The bulldozer will smush the trash so we can compact it in as much as possible. We have over 1 million people living here in San Antonio, and we have only 2 open landfills. In the state of Texas, it actually takes only 30 to 50 years to fill up a landfill, which is not a lot of time in the grand scheme of things. So that's why we as a city are really pushing for recycling as well as composting, because that helps make sure that we save space in the landfill to extend their lifespan as well as cut back on methane emissions. Here on this next slide, you actually see some of our garbage trucks dumping out trash at the landfill, so you can see it's lots of trash piled up behind them. As you can see on this slide, sometimes when we're done filling up our landfill, we've capped it off, we will add solar panels on top so we can help with the production of clean, renewable energy. In San Antonio, another thing we have done to an old landfill is to actually turn it into a park. Pictured here is Pearsall Park, which is located in southwest San Antonio, and it sits on a capped and monitored landfill. Next, we will talk about HHW. If you remember from the beginning, HHW stands for Household Hazardous Waste, and it's these items that you see pictured here. Old electronics, phones, light bulbs, cleaning chemicals, paints, and pesticides are just a few of the common examples. We don't want any of these items in any of our 3 carts because these items are a potential fire and safety hazard. So what we do is we'll actually collect these items at designated drop-off sites around the city where we can recycle them for parts and dilute the chemicals. We even use collected paint to cover up graffiti around the city. So, how does household hazardous waste affect us? Oftentimes, HHW like medicine, cleaning products, and chemicals are illegally dumped or thrown down the drain. When it goes down the drain, they're sent to wastewater treatment facilities. We have facilities like these right here in San Antonio, and even though HHW goes through physical and chemical treatments, the chemicals can be too strong to be filtered out. The chemicals then end up in our water system and our oceans where fish can absorb the chemicals. The chemicals then find their way up the food chain where us humans can either drink them or eat them in our diets. This is how HHW can harm our bodies and our health. It's also why we stress properly disposing of these materials. Next, we're going to talk about our newest cart, which is our Green Organics cart. There's 3 main categories of items that belong in this Green Organics cart. The first one being yard waste. Yard waste includes things like grasses, dead leaves, dead plants, branches, anything from your front or backyard. The next category of items is food scraps. So food scraps include things like vegetable peels, orange peels, apple cores, any leftover food or food scraps that you may have in your fridge or when you're done eating. The last category of items is one that people don't really know about, or it's not as commonly known, and this is one that I would really love if you'd share with your parents or your neighbors. The last one being food soiled paper. Food soiled paper includes things like greasy pizza boxes, dirty fast food bags, dirty used napkins or tissues, and dirty paper takeout boxes. The reason why we want these in the green cart is because A, they are compostable, and B, if you look in that picture, you see that really greasy pizza box. We cannot recycle the grease on that pizza box. It makes it really complicated in the recycling process and really halts our efficiency with things. So, everything that I listed before belongs in the green cart. We ship it off to a place where it gets composted. So why compost? Composting is important because of the positive effects it can have on the environment and the planet. When we put organic material inside of the landfill, it produces that greenhouse gas, the methane that we talked about earlier. What I didn't mention before is that methane gas is actually 20 times stronger than the carbon dioxide we get from our compost pile. The goal is less methane gas, which leads to less air pollution. What is compost? Compost is a nutrient-rich fertilizer from decayed organic waste which is used to improve soil quality and conditions in gardens and landscapes. The decayed organic material is the materials that we discussed earlier: food waste, yard waste, and food soiled paper. The final cart we're going to talk about is the blue recycling cart, and there are four main items that go inside of this cart. The first one being paper, next is plastic, then we have cans and glass. Paper items include the ones pictured there on the screen. That would be newspaper, magazines, milk cartons, any cardboard material, junk mail. Plastic includes anything that comes from your kitchen or your bathroom. So that would be water bottles, milk jugs, ketchup bottles, shampoo and lotion bottles, even things like yogurt cups and butter containers. Cans is pretty straightforward. That includes soda cans and food cans. That also includes things like aerosol cans from air freshener and body spray. We just ask that the aerosol cans are completely empty before they go in the blue cart and that the plastic nozzle has been removed. Finally, we have glass. Now, glass has a very special rule before recycling it. Glass can only be recycled if it had food or drink in it when you bought it. So that would include things like pickle jars, jelly jars, salsa jars, glass soda bottles. Does not include things like mirrors, windshields, vases, or anything of that sort. Only food or drink containers. You can also place the metal lid inside of the blue cart. We just ask that you separate it from the glass container before placing them inside. One final thing about these four items that is very important to stress is that these items must be clean before you recycle them. So make sure you rinse out any extra food residue or soda or juice with a little bit of water. This helps prevent contamination. So why recycle? The main reason why we want to recycle is to conserve our natural resources. I'm going to talk about four today. These four natural resources make the four recyclable materials that we talked about in the last slide. Wood and trees make paper, sand makes glass, oil makes all of your plastic materials, and the rocks and minerals pictured in the last circle make all of your cans. Now, three of these four materials are non-renewable, meaning that they will not be replenished in our lifetime. So that's why we really stress recycling these materials so we can conserve our natural resources. Another reason to recycle is to reduce our air and our water pollution. First, I'm going to touch on air pollution. Air pollution comes from many different sources. Waste management practices, pictured at the bottom of the slide, release methane gas that we mentioned before. Industry and energy supply at the top right are also important for our discussion. Mining, extracting, and refining fossil fuels used to make our recyclable materials, such as plastic and cans, can have a large impact on the quality of our air. A great way to deal with these air pollution sources, as well as lessen our demand for fossil fuels, is to switch to renewable energy such as solar or wind power, which is cleaner for the environment. We can also cut down our dependency on non-renewable resources by cutting out single-use plastics like Ziplocs, straws, plastic utensils. Some of the reasons to refuse these items are they are made from fossil fuels, they have a huge carbon footprint, they're commonly littered, and take a really long time to decompose. Only a small fraction are able to be recycled, and the plastics can actually enter our food chain. One of the most notable single-use plastics is plastic bottles. To make a plastic bottle, you need 1/4 of a liter of oil and 3 liters of water for just a single 1-liter water bottle. So plastic bottles not only use up fossil fuels, but they consume lots of water in the production process. Let's continue our discussion of water pollution. Plastic persists in the ocean for really long periods of times. Bottle caps and bags often end up being eaten by wildlife such as fish, sea turtles, and birds. The plastic bags can actually take about 20 years to decompose in the ocean. Fishing nets take approximately 600 years, and plastic water bottles that we talked about earlier take 450 years to decompose in the ocean. And they don't completely disintegrate, they actually only photodegrade, meaning that they break down into even smaller little pieces of plastic, which can be really harmful for smaller fish when they ingest them. And that's exactly how it ends up in our food chains. While that plastic is in the ocean, it can actually get caught up in a gyre. A gyre is a whirlpool of water that traps collections of trash in their water currents and air currents, making the large trash islands that you may have seen in the news. The most notable gyre is the North Pacific Garbage Patch, which is about 2 times the size of Texas. Here on this picture, you actually see a map of other major gyres in the world. There's 4 others persisting. So, how does that plastic pollution damage the environment and essential ecosystems? Here are some stats about how that plastic is affecting ocean wildlife. Fish in the North Pacific ingest 12 to 24,000 tons of plastic each year. 1 in 3 of all marine mammals have been found entangled in marine litter from fishing vessels, and nearly all Laysan albatross chicks have plastic in their stomachs. How does this affect things? Well, plastic ends up in our food systems, and whale, fish, and bird species are at risk of extinction. If this presentation has you interested in how you can get involved, consider some careers in the solid waste industry. Many assume it's just the sciences and engineering involved in the solid waste industry. That is true. We do use sciences and engineering in our landfill operations, recycling facilities, and our planning sections. But there are many technical jobs needed, such as drivers and mechanics. We also have a huge need for things like accountants, lawyers, and marketing professionals. Many different skill sets are needed to make sure that our department can achieve our goal of making San Antonio a clean and beautiful place to live. Now that you're a student in high school, you can actually start looking at internships or jobs in our department. One of the great perks of working at Solid Waste is that you get to save the environment, all while earning tuition reimbursement for college courses. Thank you for joining me today in my talk about recycling in our department. If you have any questions, please visit us at essayrecycles.org.